first and last on your guided notes. Thankfully, I didn't make you copy everything down here. It's a guide so that you can follow along. Okay, first thing we're going to review is to do a fraction to a decimal. The main operation I want you to remember when we do a fraction to a decimal is division. So in the box here, we're going to say divide. We divide the numerator by the denominator. We're going to do a quick example. So let's say you have the fraction, you have 5/8, okay, and you want to turn it into a decimal. We do the standard algorithm. 5 goes under the house, or is your dividend. 8 then becomes your divisor. 8 cannot go into 5, so we have to add a decimal and a 0. Don't forget, bring your decimal to the top. We said 8 cannot divide into 5, so we put a 0, but 8 can go into 50 at least 6 times. We subtract 48. 50 subtract 48 would give us 2. And since we're doing long division, you cannot have a remainder. So I add another 0 to my dividend and bring it down. 80 will divide into 20 at least twice. 8 times 2 is 16. 20 minus 16 is 4. Again, can't have a remainder. So you added a 0 to the dividend, drop it straight down. And how many times will 8 go into 40? It'll go in 5 with nothing left over. So our answer is 0.625 or 0 in 625 thousandths. Okay? I'm going to change colors because my pen seems to be running out. Alright, next one we're going to work on is decimal. We're going to change it to a percent. Okay, to change a decimal to a percent, we move the decimal 2 spaces to the right, and we include the percent sign. So our example here will be 0 in 1800ths, or 0.18. Okay, you move the decimal 2 spaces to the right, and it now becomes 18%. You could also turn this decimal into a fraction and figure out your percent. How would you say this decimal in the proper way? We would say it's 18 hundredths because our 8 is in the hundredths place. So 18 over 100. Now that automatically doesn't make it a percent, but the fact that it's over 100, we know that the word percent stands for every 100. So any number over 100 makes it a percent. So 18 is over 100, our percent is 18. Okay, moving on. We now have a percent, and we're going to change the percent to a fraction. We're going to write our percent as a fraction. So for instance, they gave us 75%. We know that the word percent means for every 100. So if we have 75%, we know it's 75 over 100. And then simplify the fraction. In this case, we can simplify 75 over 100. What number will divide into both? Great, 25. 75 divided by 25 would give us 3, and 100 divided by 25 would give us 4. So our final simplest form fraction is actually 3/4. Okay, two more things to remember is if you're wanting to convert a percent to a decimal, we're going to move the decimal how many spaces? 2 spaces to the left. And we're going to drop the percent sign. Remember, if we're taking it from a percent to a decimal, our numbers should get smaller. Okay, so for instance, if I have 19%, my decimal technically is right here. Even though I don't see it, it's there. And I need to move it 2 spaces to the left. And I'm going to drop the percent sign. So I've got 0.19. Okay, and then last one. If I'm going backwards, if I'm going decimal to a percent, I'm going to do the opposite of what I had in my instructions up here. We're going to move the decimal, how many spaces? 2. To the right, and we're going to include the percent sign. So again, if I had, let's say, 0.43 as my decimal, I'm going to move my decimal 2 spaces to the right, and I'm going to include the percent sign. So my number is now 43 with the percent sign because it makes all the difference in the value of the number. It's 43%. Okay, and last but not least, something I want you to remember is that at any point you can have a fraction or a decimal or a percent, and they're interchangeable. Okay? If you have the fraction and you're trying to get to a percent, convert it to a decimal first. And then it becomes as easy as moving the decimal point. If you have a percent, sometimes it's easier then to convert it to a decimal and then convert it to a fraction. Okay? These are your guided notes that I want you to keep track of and keep them in your notebook. Okay? It's kind of like a cheat sheet. So if you flip it over on the back, we're going to do some guided practice. All right? And I've made a chart here for you. So we're going to take, we've got 2/5, and they want you to convert it to both a decimal and a percent. So I look back at my guided notes and I say, okay, a fraction to a decimal. What am I supposed to do? I'm going to do division. I'll put it right here. Okay? 2 becomes my dividend. My numerator always goes under the house, or my dividend first. And 5 is my divisor. 5 cannot divide 2 because it's not big enough. So I add a decimal and a 0. Bring your decimal straight up. Now I ask myself, can 5 divide 20? And the answer to that is yes. It will go in 4 times with nothing left over. So my decimal is 0.4. Okay? And then going back, recalling what I know about decimals and percents, you can look back at your guided notes. I've got 0.4, and it tells me if I'm moving my decimal, I got to move it 2 spaces to the right. If there's nothing there, add a 0 as a placeholder. And my answer then becomes 40%. If it is a percent, you need to include the percent sign. Otherwise, it's just 40. Okay? Now they've given me the decimal as 0.68. So I write this exactly the same way that I say it. It's 68, that's your number, and you ask yourself, what place value is that last digit in? And it's in the hundredth spot. So I would say this is 68 hundredths. So come over here to fractions, and I write 68 hundredths. Except for I have to finish simplifying it. And I know that 68 and 100 are both even numbers. Therefore, they'll divide by 2. 68 divided by 2 is 34. 100 divided by 2 is 50. And I have to ask myself, is this as simple as this fraction will go? And the answer again is no, because 34 and 50 are both even numbers. So simplify it by 2 again. 34 divided by 2 is 17. And 50 divided by 2 is 25. There are no common factors between 17 and 25. So 17 25ths is my final fraction. Okay, knowing what I know about percents, it's for every 100. So there's two ways I can look at this. I've got 68 over 100. We know that all percents are over 100, so therefore my final answer is 68%. Or I can ask myself, if I move this decimal 2 spots to the right, it would give me the whole number 68, and I include my percent. Okay? I'm going to let you complete the next 4 on your own, next 5, I'm sorry, there's 5 left, on your own. I'd like for the teacher in the room to pause the video. Give your students about 4, maybe 5 minutes tops to work on the next 5 problems. When you unpause the video, the answers will be on the video. Okay, so if you have 32%, I move the decimal 2 spaces back, and it gives me 32 hundredths, which is also the same way to say a fraction. 32 hundredths can be simplified by 4. Your final answer in your fraction column should be 8 24ths. Your second one gave you a mixed number. I hope you didn't let this stump you too much. You had 3, which is a whole number, and you had 7/8. Well, we know that we still have to divide our fraction like we normally do. It's still a process that we have to do. So 3 becomes your whole number. So your whole number transfers right over. And then your decimal right here, after you've done division of your fraction, goes right behind your decimal. So 3 875 thousandths is your decimal. And you move your decimal 2 spots to the right, and your percent is 387.5%. And yes, it is okay to have a decimal and a percent. You had 76 hundredths as your decimal, which is also another way to say the fraction, 76 over 100. It can be simplified by 4, and your final simplified fraction is 19 25ths. Or you take your decimal and you move it 2 spaces to the right, and you've got 76%. Also recall that all percents are over 100, so since 76 is over 100, you know automatically that 76% is your percent. Okay, you've got 35%. First, we converted it to a decimal by moving our decimal 2 spots to the left, so it gives us 35 hundredths. 35 hundredths is also the proper way to say a fraction. 35 and 100 will both simplify by 5, leaving you with the final answer of 7 20ths. And last but not least, your question was 3 12 hundredths as a fraction or as a decimal. 3 12 hundredths, you say that as a mixed number, it's also a fraction. 12 and 100 will both simplify by 4. So your final fraction is 3 3/25. Take your same decimal and move your decimal 2 places to the right, and it becomes 312%. Okay? So that is your guided practice for today. Now, your activity that you are going to complete on your own has you do a percent solve in color. First and foremost, go ahead and put your name on your paper, your name, date, and put your class section where it says PD, that'll be your period. And let's read the directions. It says find the equivalent form of each number. Then find the answer and color it the corresponding color. So you are going to find 85% as both a fraction and a decimal. Okay, you're going to show your work on a separate sheet of paper. And we go down to the bottom and we look for our equivalent fraction or our equivalent decimal. If you notice down here at the bottom, you've got red, yellow, pink, blue, light green, orange, dark green, and purple. In each box, you have two different forms. Your goal is to match up what your answer is up here in this box to your answer box down at the bottom. That will tell you what number or what color we're going to color our box. Okay? Okay, so for instance, we have 85% is also 85 over 100. I know that I can simplify both by 5. 85 hundredths is equivalent to 17 twentieths. But since I'm not sure which one is listed down at the bottom, I have to do both fraction and decimal. 85%, I'm moving it to a decimal. It means move my decimal 2 spots to the left, and my answer is 0.85 or 85 hundredths. Now I go down to the bottom and I look for either one of these answers. And I find 17 twentieths, and that means I color the number 1 blue. So I write blue here in the blocks. Once I've gone through all 16 problems, I flip my paper over, and there are little bitty numbers along each part of this person that tells you what to color the hair, what to color the skin, what to color the top of the beaker, her glove, the pockets on her jacket, the lapel on her coat, her glove, her pant legs, her feet or her socks, I'm not really sure which one she's wearing, her shoes, the table, the beaker, the bubble, the sign, the background color of the sign, the eraser, the border to my picture, the balance beams, there's one here, there's one number here and a different one here, and the bottom of my balance beam. Now, those are specified based on what answers you got on the front of the handout. Okay? So it's not just random colors. There is actually a rhyme and a reason to it. Right? So show your work on a separate sheet of paper. Again, each time you come up with the number and you come up with the answer, be sure to put the letter in there or the color in the box that it belongs to. So all the number 1s on the opposite side of the paper, I'm going to color blue. Go through this part with a pencil and an eraser because you are human and mistakes do happen, and do that first before you start coloring. The coloring is the least important part of this activity. Have a great day.